Welcome to the first Facebook Live for the Minnesota Historical Society. Hope I'm coming through okay. This is an experiment for certainly for me, and it's the first for the Historical Society folks too. So we'll see how it goes. I put a shirt with a button on, which is a first for probably about a month. Actually, that's pretty uncommon, anyways. But uh, I even brushed my teeth for you guys, which didn't make any sense, of course, in hindsight. But we're here to talk First Avenue. Obviously, with the 50th anniversary last week, it's just such a bittersweet thing. Um, so many of us were just gutted to be away from that club this week. Certainly, the folks who work there and had a hell of a great lineup set for this last weekend with the Hold Steady and Harmar Superstars new band and the Harpones and the Golden Smog reunion and Nico Case. Those shows are going to all be made up. We'll get back to rocking and rolling there soon, hopefully. Um, but it's going to be a while, so it's kind of a dramatic time for the club and for those of us who love it. Um, hope everyone's staying healthy mentally and physically through all this. I miss those of you I know out there. I miss you. It's been it was kind of a down in the dumps day for me with the John Prine news, as I'm sure it was many of you. I was just a huge John Prine fan. Just love the guy. He actually had no ties to First Avenue whatsoever. In fact, Steve McClellan, longtime First Avenue general manager who booked the place for decades. He posted on Facebook last night that not booking John Prine is one of his regrets, or one of the acts he wishes he could have booked all those years. Sue McLean, promoter in town, she kind of cornered the market on John. He liked her, and she was a huge fan of his. So they never got him at First Avenue. Too bad. But anyways, salute to John, and we'll carry on with this anyways, as we're carrying on with everything. Why are we doing this? We are doing this, Minnesota Historical Society and the Minnesota Historical Society Press wanted to, just tout their resources, the wonderful things they do around the state while during this downtime, and launch this series. It made sense to do it, obviously, with the 50th anniversary of First Ave. To start with me, poor me, I'm the sucker to go first, but I think it's I'm happy to tout First Avenue. This isn't really about promoting the book. They maybe don't want me to say that. I think most of you who have tuned in already have the book or got it from your library or whatever. That's fine. So I'm going to kind of just assuming that if you don't have the book, though, I will say they actually sell it on the First Avenue website. You can, and buying it there, they're just acting as the retailer in that case, just like a bookstore would. And obviously, if you buy it there, you're supporting the club. I've supported the club. I've bought some concert tickets. That's a great way to support the club right now. These shows that are being postponed, they're going to happen, and if they don't happen, you're going to get a full refund. So you might as well buy those tickets now. I bought the Drive By Trucker show that was postponed till September. I bought some of those. I bought some of the X and Violent Femmes shows at the Palace Theater that First Ave is booking. I think if my brother and brother-in-law are watching, they probably can guess what their birthday presents are going to be. So that's a great way to support the club right now too. Maybe the best way to support the club right now is to support they actually had this fund going. It's the Twin Cities Music Community Trust website is actually wait, I have a prop. My daughter made a prop. I see a lot of the musicians putting up their websites and stuff, very low tech. I don't even know if this is going to show up. Twin Cities Music Community Trust.org. My daughter Louisa made that. That's the fund for the out of work, and I don't think it's just First Avenue people. It was designed for out of work music professionals. It includes stage crews, bartenders, anybody that's music related or related to the many great venues in town will benefit from this. That's one way to support it. They have Harmar superstar Sean Tillman and his fiance Laura Hauser. They launched this coloring book, which again my daughter Luisa and I colored today together. Where they got the fake merch stand, you can see Lulu's Awesome Band LAB. That's hers. This goes to the Twin City Music Community Trust.org. That's coloring books for a cause. If you Google that, coloring books for a cause, this is going to come up. It's a ton of fun. We're having fun with that, and that supports the cause. So that was kind of getting all that out of the way. Not getting out of the way. I hope I know a lot of you are supporting that fund and supporting the club, and as the author of the book on First Avenue, Minnesota's Mainroom, there's these dramatic turning points in the club's history, which I keyed on, and kind of the dramatic centerpiece of the book, or the kind of the dramatic apex of it, was when bankruptcy closing in 2004, when there was an ownership battle going on, and I mean, it really did look like there was a chance the place could be lost. And so just as the writer, you look for these dramatic points, and my God, I mean, if I was going to write part 2 or a second book, this right now is where it starts. It's a really dramatic time for the club. It's going to be hard, but I know that the folks there are very dedicated to keeping everything going, and obviously we all can't wait to get back there, so I'm looking forward to that. I will talk about the book now, pivoting to talking about the book, which again I assume most of you have, but if you don't, First Avenue, Minnesota's Mainroom. I don't know what my notes are in here. I use this for research now. Myself, I research my own research, which is really what a ton of the work on the book was. It took me about 2 years to do the book, more than 2 years actually, and that's not counting being at that point 15 years on the job at the Star Tribune, covering local music, and obviously covering First Avenue is a huge part of the beat when you're covering local music in Minneapolis. So I took 2 years plus those 15 years, and then most of it, a ton of it was research. I just trying to find, going back to the hippie era of the Depot, God love it, but the record keeping wasn't exactly much to speak of. Actually, it wasn't much to speak of up until the invention of the internet. There was a lot of holes to fill. Just simple things like. I had a hard time. A lot of people talked about the Culture Club shows in 1983 and how awesome those were, which very much a band of the era of the moment. I couldn't find the dates on those. There was no record of the dates of those. I couldn't find. I mean, I eventually found it, but stuff like that. And you can imagine how hard in the Depot era, 1970, 71, how hard that was to find stuff of that. I had a lot of the opening weekend, which was 50 years ago last weekend. There was a lot of, it was actually front page of the Minneapolis Tribune and Minneapolis Star were two papers at that point. I think both papers it was actually front page, but I think it was the Tribune had a really nice front page photo, and that's a photo that if you went to the exhibit at the History Center, they had a real nice photo of folks standing in line outside. Finding coverage of that was pretty easy. After that, it kind of died off, and I'm thinking that this upcoming weekend is the 50th anniversary of the second weekend, which was the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, which was a pretty big band of that era. I had a hard time finding records of that, but I did get some info on that. The third weekend was Poco, kind of the Buffalo Springfield offshoot band. Those are kind of very of the era bands, but they were big, and it's from the get go it was a pretty happening place. I was thinking, as I say, I think most of you have seen the book. I've given, for the book's been out 2 years. I've blabbed about it a lot. I was thinking I would. As sort of the enticement tonight, or I don't know the headliner tonight. I was going to go through. I had a list of uh, that didn't. It's an outtake. These are outtakes from the book. I had this. We sort of envisioned it as a sub chapter within the book from kind of the late '80s, early '90s era, which was obviously one of the heydays of the club, one of the heydays I think of rock music. Period. Uh, Obviously, being myself being of that era, but in the book I have I think 3 pages on the Nirvana shows there. I start one of the chapters with the Pearl Jam opening for as the third opening band for Trip Shakespeare. No, and nobody was there to see him. So I've got them in there, but I had this whole list of all these other bands of that era that you couldn't find. I mean, there wasn't much to go on of their shows. There wasn't a great record, so I did a lot of digging. Actually, a lot of it was on Facebook. I asked people if they went to this show, went to that show, and it's something that didn't make the book. I was behind on on my deadline, as writers will do. And it got lost in the shuffle somewhere. I turned in way too much copy, which if any of my Star Tribune editors are watching now, they would be laughing quite uproariously at that. So I thought I would kind of go through that, go through this list, kind of skim through it. We're talking Radiohead, we're talking Hole, Green Day, My Bloody Valentine, Nine Inch Nails, Soundgarden, the Pixies, Jane's Addiction, those kind of bands. So I hope you guys are into this. I do want to say one thing. I assume most of you also went to the Historical Society, the Minnesota History Center in St. Paul, for the First Avenue exhibit, which was based off of the book. It was kind of all in the works together. Great synergy. They did such a great job with that exhibit. That exhibit, it's not looking good. It was supposed to stay open through May 3rd. And Governor Walz today, the order was everything was stay at home through May 4th. And I don't think I think they have something else coming in at the History Center, for if and when they do open. I don't think that exhibit's going to be open. The good news is, well, hopefully you all already saw it. If you didn't see it, they put a bunch of the stuff up online on the Minnesota Historical Society website. You can see some of the items in it and everything. I think the really coolest stuff are the videos. Some of the best are Dan Corrigan, who was the house photographer for many years. He kind of keeps the place together at this point. He's just sort of the fix it all guy, and he's a tour guide. He gives tours. He has all these behind the scene videos he shows you behind the stage where all the set lists are hanging. he talks about how the entry was created and just all these, kind of looking at the whole infrastructure of the place. A lot of the things you don't get to see if you're just a customer. So I highly recommend going to that and checking that out, to the Minnesota Historical Society website. I actually got to see the exhibit. I went back to it just about a month ago, so not long before the quarantine happened, and it did such a wonderful job with it. It was moving. Every time I went in there, it was moving. I mean, partly because it was, seeing your book that you toiled over come to life, but also just because it really championed and celebrated that place and all the people who put in so much blood, sweat, and tears in there. And so it was wonderful. So at least check it out online, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to get to pivoting to the just kind of skimming through these late 80s, 90s bands, little kind of meaty one graph things I wrote on them. In the meantime, if you guys want to throw up any questions, any comments, you want to call me a doofus, that's fine. I'm used to it. If you've seen the Star Tribune comment section, you can throw nothing at me that will affect me. So fire away. But no, hopefully you got some good questions. But let's start with Jane's Addiction. Jane's Addiction played two shows. In the entry, November 27th, 1988, and then they came back and did the main room in December 2nd, 1990. Here's what I wrote. Most attendees remember singer Perry Farrell hanging from the metal rebar in the entry's low-hanging ceiling during his band's first go-round. Guitarist Terry Eason from that night's opening band Babylon Pink. Terry became a really many bands and a great guitarist in town. Terry Eason remembers Farrell's echo-drenched vocals and the ashtrays attached to their amps. Eason said, quote, "It blew my mind that the place was so packed." Treehouse Records owner Mark Treehouse was not a fan, but said, quote, "You knew they were going to be huge after 2 minutes." And club operations manager Molly McManus, Molly worked there throughout the 90s, I think was a big part of the club. She cited that the Jane's Addiction main room show in 1990 as one of the decade's best shows. She said, quote, "The crowd was so into it, the band just kind of transcended." That's one I wish I had been at, for sure. Let's move on to the Pixies. This one's kind of interesting. The Pixies played the club at least 5 times, going back to June 3rd, 1988 in the entry. That one ended with a cover of the Beatles' quirky classic Wild Honey Pie, and it was preceded by an in-store gig a block away at Northern Lights. A lot of the bands did that in that era. There's some good stories in the book about when Nirvana did one. And that was very colorful. Actually, the Nirvana one, there's bootleg of it, and you kind of, Dave Grohl is kind of the ringleader, and you kind of get an insight into, the personality that is Dave Grohl, which you didn't get to see that much behind the drum kit in those days. There's also stories of Nick Cave doing an in-store at Northern Lights, and did not go well. Was not, as you can imagine. I'll leave it at that. The Pixies did one before their first time. They came back, did a 2-night stand in 1992 in the main room, which is most remembered because it fell opposite Super Bowl 26 across downtown at the Metrodome. So the Pixies were there the night of the first Super Bowl. Staff and fans recall that the shows, however, were not so super, and the band showed signs of that year's impending breakup. Writer Danny Siegelman, shout out to Danny if he's here. Danny Siegelman recalled, quote, "The only thing Black Francis said all night was when he asked the audience, 'Does anyone here believe in UFOs?' And when he received complete silence, he replied, 'Well, that figures.'" So Frank Black, ladies and gentlemen, he's actually gotten very nice over the years. He was two of my worst all-time interviews were Black Francis, but also 2 of my best interviews later. He became very nice. So we'll give him his love. Let me see how we doing. Thanks everyone. Soundgarden played a lot. And that goes up to, that probably explains why when Audio Slave was first taken off later, which was Chris Cornell and the members of Rage Against the Machine, they played their second show ever that was their second road show ever. The second show of their first tour was at in the main room. But flashback to Soundgarden. Seattle's more metallic grunge heroes beat Nirvana to the entry by a month and played 2 nights in the small room behind their debut album Ultra Mega OK. That was in March of 1989, by the way. Terry Eason again. Terry Eason remembers one of those nights being fairly empty, but said, quote, "They were great. What a kick-ass drummer." That would be Matt Cameron, who's then became the drummer of Pearl Jam as well, who was great. Soundgarden then headlined the main room in the spring of 1990 with Faith No More opening, and then they came back in August on a co-headlining tour with Danzig. That's a show a lot of people remember. And that wasn't all. The Soundgarden also made a semi-surprise appearance alongside the Cows and Run Westy Run in a Rock for Choice benefit on January 22nd, 1992, which was also when Soundgarden was, they were opening for 2 nights at Target Center opening for Guns N' Roses, which a lot of people remember those shows too. But that's cool. They came back, they were playing Target Center, came back and did this benefit while in town. That sounded like a lot of fun. How we doing? You guys into this? I hope so. I miss the place. Dan, yeah, no, I'm sure you do, Dan. Hope you're holding up. Is that SST or Soundgarden? That was Ultra Mega OK. Was yeah. They at least obviously in their entry years they were on SST. Um, I think by the time they came back, probably by the time they came to the main room, certainly with Faith No More opening, they were on in the big time by then. They probably they came back. They were probably too big to play there by the time they finished. I'm sure. Um, Nine Inch Nails. This one is again. I would have loved. You know, it's funny. A lot of these. A personal note. I didn't live here when I saw all these tours. I was this is my coming of age becoming rock shows. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. I grew up in here. My family moved to Austin when I was still in high school. Um, Not a bad music town. I saw a lot of these shows there and had a lot of these similar experiences. When people were posting about the 50th anniversary last night, this era came up a lot, and at least among my friends. And I was kind of like, I didn't see that show at First Avenue, but I did see it at Liberty Launch or later Stubbs in Austin. These were such great shows. The Nine Inch Nails one. Uh, Nine Inch Nails is a rare band that played the main room before they played the entry, because their first time playing there was on tour opening for Peter Murphy. Trent Reznor's crew shared an elaborate stage production with the ex-Bauhaus singer, featuring rolls of film unspooled all over the stage as a visual effect. So I guess it was just kind of like not curtains, but all these spools. I don't know. It sounded super cool. Uh, John Eichten, shout out to John Eichten. John Eichten, then a college radio DJ in St. Cloud, said, "quote It was the only time I've walked in there and was amazed by the setup. Eichten remembers a lot of the crowd standing in one place during Nine Inch Nails, but eventually getting into it." He also said Peter Murphy was at the top of his game that night. Peter was great in those years. He was great. Reznor came back and headlined the entry that summer, so they came back to the entry. As I say, rarely happened. They played in the entry. They played their debut album pretty much in full, and also throwing a cover of Queen's "Get Down, Make Love." Man, that would have been Nine Inch Nails in the entry. Um, I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to scroll through some of the comments and questions. I'm going to do My Bloody Valentine. Again, personally, those guys were amazing in that era. I saw them at Liberty Lunch in Austin. They played the entry before anybody knew who they were. There's a great, actually, this memory here from the late Ed Ackerson, who was, most of you know, was a long time sound man in the 7th Street Entry, but he's also, musician in a bunch of bands, Polera, later BNLX, and sideman producer. Anyways, he about My Bloody Valentine. They first played in the spring of 1989. The notorious loud and hugely influential Irish band first played a poorly attended entry gig in spring 1989. Ed Ackerson said that the first show was, quote, one of those overwhelming sensations of seeing what you believe is the best band in the entire world with about 12 of your friends and members of the opening act. Many more people saw them, and will never forget seeing them in 1989 when My Bloody Valentine was sandwiched between Babes in Toyland and headliners Dinosaur Jr. That was actually a Babes in Toyland being the local band. That was a full tour. They were on that full tour. I saw that exact show in Austin as well. Well, here, I'll let the people describe it. Minneapolis fan Jenny Lewis said of that show, My Bloody Valentine blew my mind in a very big way. Writer and musician Chris Strouth remembered, quote, the club literally ran out of earplugs. I have had mild tinnitus ever since. So, fun stuff. There we go. Sue Johnson, MVB reason for my tinnitus. There you go. That's exactly right. They were so amazing. I can't imagine seeing them at First Ave. Like what I wonder how that sound system held up and the building held up with that. I mean, that they played that Roy Wilkins show, maybe about 7-8 years ago after 20 years of hiatus, and it was just physically, it just was like somebody pushing on you. You felt it so physically. Let me see any questions here. Yeah. Yeah, shout out to Dan Corrigan again. Um, uh, yeah, this thanks Cynthia. Um, oh, Kirk saw Rage. I got Rage here. Rage, Weezer, Soul Coughing live quite a few times there. Um, Weezer, love or hate Weezer. Weezer came back when they were way too big to play there a couple times, including like I think 2005 when they were playing arenas at that point. Um, and that was one of the more fun shows. Um, what else we got? 10,000 Maniacs. But yeah, 10,000 Maniacs. That would have been a fun one. Um, Amy, shout out to Amy. How's it going, Amy? What were your favorite country acts that you saw, and did you see Public Enemy? How did you make Grandma Nina's? Okay, that's my cousin. All right. Anyways, favorite country. Actually, they did have some country acts, Amy, and at First Ave in the '80s. Dwight Yoakam played there a lot. Real country, not the stuff you guys are into. Well, you guys like the real country too, but you know what I'm saying. Uh, but no, they had a good run of country shows. Emmylou Harris, I know, remember played there too. Jimmy Dale Gilmore. Uh, so the country did have its place, and of course, a lot of the more alt country kind of bands. And actually, the Jayhawks, I think we've established uh, through PD Larson that the Jayhawks have played the club 70 times, which we're pretty certain, the clubs plural, both rooms, we're pretty certain has to be the record of who's played there the most. Because they started in the gosh, what about 82, 83? PD, I'm sure will correct me on that. But and they're still packing the place to this day. Um, and Golden Smog was their offshoot was supposed to play there. Rage Against the Machine, we brought that up. Who are due back uh, in town, obviously. Um, where's my Rage one here? Those Rage shows are supposed to be rescheduled. God, I hope they are. Where is Rage? Well, I guess I don't have the Rage here. See, already something's going wrong. How about I remember Tool? That's one. That's one is kind of wild. Tool, May 12th, 1994. After a year after appearing at Lollapalooza in St. Paul. I know why Rage isn't in there now that I think about it, because we did include the Rage stories in the book. This is all stuff that wasn't in the book. So consult your book on the Rage Against the Machine appearances, because those are some pretty colorful stories. Tool, a year after appearing at Lollapalooza in St. Paul, the Artie Metal Quartet made an overdue local headlining debut when it was already too big to play First Avenue. The 11-song set came mostly off its first album, Undertow. Without the full visual spectacle of later tours, the concert's most lasting visual memory was the testosterone-heavy audience. Attendee John Wessinger said, John, I hope if you're watching, John Wessinger said, quote, "It was 100% dudes. Shirts were optional." And First Avenue regular Matt Barker called it the most impressive mosh pit he's seen there. Quote, "Between the countless opportunities of getting headbutted or passing out from the massive stench of BO, I felt lucky to get out alive." That's pretty great. Um, One show, I could pull out Hole. Uh, Bum, bum, bum. Uh, Hole was that whole album lived through this. They came touring for that. Such a great album. Those shows were very erratic. I saw a very, very erratic one in Austin. Here's how the First Avenue one went down. October 4th, 1994. The whole concert. Performing 6 months after her husband Kurt Cobain's death, Courtney Love, impressed with the songs off that year's album, lived through this, but turned many in the crowd off with her between-song banter. She accused First Avenue of, quote, "losing its cool," and then snidely played some of Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran, who Duran Duran has this, they did play the club on the right way up, and they played it on the way down too. But come on. Obviously, there's cooler things than Duran Duran, and some people think Duran Duran are the coolest band. Anyways, And then Courtney turned her memory of visiting Cobain there on tour in 1991 into a slam against the whole city. She was quoted in the Star Tribune review by Neil Justin, he's our TV critic now. He was only a music critic for a while, but he's still a great music fan. Neil's review said, quoted Courtney as saying, quote, Kurt and I were going out and we were kissing back there. Somebody took my coat, tore it up, and threw it in the trash. So that's Minneapolis to me. Miss you, Courtney. What else? Did Soundgarden headline with Danzig? Well, Mark, you might have seen that one. I think I would assume Soundgarden headlined that. I'm sure in your mind, Mark, Danzig was the bigger thing, but and actually, Danzig was supposed to do a Elvis tour, singing Elvis songs. I am not joking. I would love to see Danzig sing Elvis. Nate and Sonia, if you're watching, book that tour when it does relaunch, because I want to see Danzig singing Elvis. Was that the Cold tour after Kurt and Foo Fighters? Oh yeah, Foo Fighters with Mike Watt in the entry in Hovercraft open. That's Eddie Vedder. So actually, Eddie came back after Pearl Jam played twice. Eddie came back and did this entry show too. Also one of those shows that I'm sure you were there, Zach, but it's one of those shows where the entry holds 250 people and 5,000 people say they were there. Chris saw the Tool show, I bet, and I'm sure it was awesome. Would you think you were me or John Copeland at more First Avenue shows? John's got me beat. I swear to God, I see John at 9 out of 10 shows I go to. And then I'm sure he's going to other ones too. And John he's quoted in the book several times. John was at he was at several of the Prince shows of the Purple Rain, the night, the August 3rd Minnesota Dance Theater show, when they recorded and when he premiered the song Purple Rain, and several others. And but John also was John had stories on the Butthole Surfers show. Linker is great to see with Southern Catcher on the Skids opening. I bet that was a good one. Boy, that reminds me of Southern Catcher on the Skids. I don't know if I ever saw them at First Avenue myself, but the Cramps I saw a couple of times, and those are legendary shows. In fact, one of the artifacts we tried to find for the exhibit was somebody had told me that there was a bent up microphone stand that from a Cramps show when he swung it into the stage, and so they kept the microphone, but also that dent in the stage had been there up until recently. They just, I guess, according to the videos I was alluding that Dan Corrigan did, they just did some repairs to the stage. That stage, I believe, without those repairs, was basically they built that for. It dates back to Purple Rain, because they built a new stage when they did the filming of Purple Rain, and I think, aside from it being patched and repaired, that is still the stage that Prince humped officially. I don't know if I can say hump. We discussed whether this was going to be family friendly or not before. Sure, why not? What else have we got? Was it Pearl Jam or Mookie Black the first time at First Avenue? It was Pearl Jam, actually. They did play Mother Love Bone, which was the precursor to Pearl Jam, but without Eddie Vedder. They did play the entry at least once, maybe twice. But the Pearl Jam played before, the first time they played, it was before the record came out, before 10 was out. And the only people who knew about the band were the few Mother Love Bone fans who saw them in the entry, and then the advanced cassette of the 10 album had started to get around. So record store clerks and radio people were the only people that showed up in time to see Pearl Jam, because it was pretty obvious that, early on, that they were going to be huge. The people who, including John Munson of Trip Shakespeare and later Semisonic, He greatly regrets not getting there in time for Pearl Jam. John said he was at home showering when Pearl Jam played. When Pearl Jam opened for his band, he was showering. So, but who knew? Who knew? That's how things went in the '90s. I mean, these and that's kind of how my chapter on that goes. Is these bands that normally in the '80s would have played the entry probably 5 times before they got big enough to play the main room. Um, they were blowing up. They'd play the club once or twice, and then they'd blow up to arena level or big theater level. So, really an amazing era of the club, I think. Okay, Danzig did headline. I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know if Danzig headlined the show here or not. They might have been swapping. Um, I don't know. What else have we got here? Horton Heat, Reverend Horton Heat open for the Cramps. Reverend Horton Heat is among touring acts. Reverend Horton Heat is probably one of the most, has some of the most appearances. He's still rocking the place regularly. He's one God, I hope he's always touring. I hope we get to see him again soon. I remember yes, I remember that too, Chris. Soul Asylum show where with Europe's Final Countdown is the walk on song. Cheesiest 80s anthem ever, and Soul Asylum embraced it and walked on it. That was actually if you guys go to my I could cross reference you to my Instagram page. I just as everyone's doing, I'm going through my crap at home because I'm stuck at home, and I just by total coincidence, and I should have grabbed them, but you can see them on my Instagram page. My earliest ticket stubs from the club, from when I was a teen and attending all ages shows, and Soul Asylum in '87, which was the Hang Time tour. I when I was doing the book tour, I'd always get asked what were my favorite shows, and so hard to pin down. I would just stick to the local angle, and that Soul Asylum show in '87. They were a band that was people don't realize how great a live band Soul Asylum was in those days. They're still great, they really are. But in those days, it was just thrilling to see them. And Hang Time was an amazing album. That was a great tour. So they were a band, kind of a band that was really taken off at that point. It was so exciting to see them. The other local show I always cite, and I couldn't single out a specific one, but the Doomtree blowout shows at First Avenue were, local band or not, some of the most intense, wild, just shows in terms of audience being so into it. Those shows in the 2010s, so great. They're due back. Doomtree's due back in early May. I don't know if they've pushed those shows off yet or not. They're playing. They were going to play the main room again, and then play the Palace. I'm sure those shows are going to happen. I know Doomtree more than as much as the fans want those to happen. I think those shows are probably going to have to be pushed off. Those were actually billed as 50th anniversary stuff again too. What else we got here? I got a few more. Jesus Lizard. That just came up. Jesus Lizard just came up. Who was posted? Ryan O'Rourke posted some photos of Jesus Lizard at the club. And it was just pure mayhem. You could see in the photos it was pure mayhem. Those were great shows too. I mean, again, I didn't see those at First Ave, but what else we got? Oh, you had to ask, Chris, the Suicidal Tendency show. Somebody else, one of my ticket stubs I posted yesterday was Suicidal Tendencies at the club in '87. I don't remember. I sort of every other ticket stub I posted, I had some sort of memory on it. I remember nothing about the Suicidal Tendency shows. I don't know if that's a sign that it wasn't very good. I don't think so. I was into that band in that time too. I don't remember anything about it. I saw them just a couple years ago. They played. Where was it? Oh, well, I guess it was more than a couple of years ago. The Mill City Knights, they played there. Still a fun, crazy band. Um, Shameless, but yeah, we're mentioning Soul Asylum. Minnesota Historical Society Press did just publish Dave Pirner, a book of his lyrics. But more than that, he goes song by song, album by album, and has a little anecdote, a little memory, and so really some interesting insight into the albums and into the songs. So that just came out. Dave was supposed to be promoting it, but they were sidelined. Actually, Dave, I just happened to talk to um, early March, and they were on tour. Soul Sound was on tour, and at that point they were still on tour. And he said at the start of the tour they switched from shaking hands to fist bumps at their meet and greets. And then I went to the elbow bumping, and then I think 2-3 days later after I talked to them, they had to start canceling the shows altogether. So it goes. These bands will be back and rocking again soon, I hope. Fugazi, those Fugazi shows you can find. Fugazi has a great live archive online somewhere. If it's a Discord record website or just fugazi.com or whatever, you can. I know there's several Fugazi shows on there. I don't know if I had any Fugazi stories in the book. I do have just the humor of, they played there I think 8-9 times over 10 years or something like that. The ticket price in that time, finally the last time around they bumped it up to, I believe it might have been up to $6 from $5, or maybe it was even only up to maybe they had been $4 and they finally bumped it up to $5 on the last time around when I know they packed the place, and they were such a thrilling band. That's a top of my list of bands. I think will eventually do some kind of reunion, and when they do, I will line up to see it. I'll even pay $5 to see it. That's how much I want to see it. Or $6, whatever. Vague memory of seeing Love and Rockets and Daniel Ash pushing a photographer off a speaker into the crowd with his foot. Well, if Dan Corrigan's still here, he'd be the one to remember that, because Dan would have probably been one of the photographers. Be nice to your photographers, folks. They serve many important roles. But I know Dan and a lot of the photographers who worked at First Avenue have gotten a lot of crap over the years, a lot of physical crap. Yeah, $5 to see Fugazi. All right, how we doing? Any other questions? What else have we got here? Who is your dream band to play when First Avenue reopens? Carmen. Hey, Carmen. Carmen from Austin, Texas. She was my first editor at the college newspaper, and she's been to the club. She's a huge Jayhawks fan. But actually, I think you came in town to see the Jayhawks, but went to see, we went the night of old 97s. Because you can't see the old 97s in Texas. You had to see them up here. Just kidding. My dream band is this is I know still the dream act of Nate Krantz as well, who's the general manager at First Avenue, and that's our homeboy Bob Dylan. Bob. Interestingly, Bob used to hang out at the club, or he not hang out, but he going back to the depot. He made people spotted him. There's one story of, I believe it was the night of the Flying Burrito Brothers, which the Flying Burrito Brothers and Frank Zappa were a double header, by the way, which seems like a bizarre double bill. I guess there's the LA connection. But anyways, Dylan was at that, probably pals with the Burrito Brothers in some form or fashion. One of the guys who worked there at the time was walking out to the garage after the show, and his car was parked out there, and he had to kick Bob Dylan off the bumper of his car so he could leave. So Bob Dylan hung out there. He's been spotted a few times. There's a picture that Lori Barbero, Babes in Toyland, took of him, uh, total paparazzi style in the entry one night. And then Bob finally committed to playing it in 2003. He was doing a run of kind of smaller venues. Uh, and the tickets were printed up and ready to go, and Bob backed out last minute. So Bob is the dream act for sure. I'm trying to think anyone else. Um, the bands I really want to see, and these would be some of my all-time favorite shows. In the early 2000s, there was just a string of bands of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, TV on the radio, and the Hives. And except for, well, no, I'm big fans of all of them. But their live shows are incredible, and their live shows at the club in particular are incredible. And those bands, for some reason, I guess the Hives have been touring, but they haven't come our way in at least over a decade. And all three of those bands have been on hiatus, more or less, or barely touring. And God, I would love to see any of them back at First Avenue as well. Um, I saw Ice T with Body Count in the main room and couldn't hear for 3 days. Yeah, Ice T with Body Count. Remember that was Ice T's metal show. They were actually, yeah, it wasn't that good, but it was fun to see him. And then there was the whole dispute with them, so they got a lot of attention. I saw them on I don't know if it was the first Lollapalooza tour or one of those early Lollapalooza tours. I don't know if Ice T. I actually there's Ice Cube. I know there's a legendary or infamous show of Ice Cube. I can't remember if Ice T performed there, did a rap show there. He must have at some point in there, but I can't remember off the top of my head. What else we got? How we doing? You guys are still with me? I'll keep moving here. Um, yeah, where we got? Yeah, Northern Lights and stores were great. Yeah, friends of Prince Tribute in St. Paul. You were very nice, although we got mosquitoed a bit. Yeah. Uh, uh, I don't know. Anything else? What have we got here? I'm trying to think here. My mom's calendar for 1970. My parents saw Willie Murphy at the Depot on August 30th, 1970. That's awesome. Uh, Mom and Dad seeing Willie Murphy. Willie, there's a great story, not a great story. Willie and the Bees, they did what was then their final shows at in 80. Well, yeah, it was 84. I know it was 84 because there's a random Prince connection. After they did their full long show. Prince was in town. The Purple Rain shows at the St. Paul Civic Center, where it was during when Prince was across town in St. Paul. Everybody thought he was going to come over and play First Avenue afterwards. Surprise show afterwards. And the people who believed that included the Minneapolis police, who the police raided the club afterwards, and they expecting to see this Prince after hours party and bust the club, bust Prince, which I honestly believe was probably the interest there was busting Prince and getting headlines. Um, all they got were Willie Murphy and a bunch of hippies, including my colleague John Bream was among the people arrested that night. There were some, few people had beers, cleanup crew and whatnot, and police hauled them away. So that was one of the fun Willie Murphy. Besides Frank Black, other problematic interviews. Oh gosh, I mean, trying to get something out of Neil Young is, and I'm a huge Neil Young fan, and I'll keep trying, but Neil Young is not just me, everyone he just doesn't give you, he barely answers a question, and he's nice enough, just Neil Young would definitely be the problematic one. Trying to think. I mean, there's people that were just outright jerks, but I won't go into some of them. So I saw the James Brown, Rod Stewart, and Small Faces, and a bunch of bands when it was the Depot. Yeah, I don't. James Brown didn't. I don't believe played there in the Depot area. But he did play there in the this Sam's. Yeah, I think it was Sam's, or it might have been the early '80s. In other words, James Brown played there. Um, I know. I know that because Chrissy Dunlop, who was a booker in the '80s, has a story about James refusing to go on until he got more money, which she she paid him, and he put on a great show, so they got their money's worth. The Small Faces show, uh, I and that was in the Deep era, obviously. That would have been an incredible one. Everyone who was there talks proudly about that one. I guess they were pretty drunk. Go figure. But it's still a great show. The Minneapolis connection with the Small Faces is that they actually played their final show at the Minneapolis. It was either auditorium or it might have been the Armory. I think it was the auditorium, so that would have been maybe what 3 4 years later. Um, then flash forward to about 5 years ago, Ian McLaughlin, the keyboardist with Small Faces, was supposed to play with Nick Lowe, and he died before making it to the gig. He was found dead at home. They were waiting for him to show up at the gig. Terrible story. Ian lived in Austin, so I actually, I didn't know him, but I talked to him several times, and it was very sad. So you get all these random uh, stories on these bands. Any band that has any storied band in rock and roll, there seems to be some connection to the club. My wife wants to know what one shows. John Bailey, a show that I've been to that I would like to take my kids to show them what it was all about. I've been trying to get the kids into John Prine. Um, since yesterday. Well, actually, I've been trying to do it since they've been born, but not quite catching on. Hope they do. Like in terms of a First Avenue show, um, I've gone with my niece actually to Doomtree. Um, she was underage. My brother-in-law, her dad took her, which you can bring your kid if you're the parent, and just super to see Doomtree, and especially with Dessa. I think I'd love to have my daughters see them as maybe one of their First Avenue shows. Who knows? Maybe we can do that this year. So uh, I don't know. I think I'm about done. We're coming up. I don't want to keep the Historical Society people working on this. Yeah, R.I.P. John Prine. I was listening to him all day. Super sad. Um, but man, he survived cancer twice, and put out this last album, Tree of Forgiveness, was just wonderful, and he was just such a spirited man up until the end. It's really inspiring to see everything he did. I think that's it for me. It was. I hope I didn't make an ass out of myself. I hope I did the Historical Society people proud. They're trying to keep the lights on for all the great things they do around the state. So keep checking back on the Historical Society Press. And again, let me plug my daughter's the Twin Cities Music Community Trust.org, which is the fund to support the out of work music professionals at First Avenue and other clubs all around town. It's especially going to be hard for them in these coming weeks. And if you love the club, you got to love the people who work there and support them. So that's it for me. Thanks, everyone.